So welcome to Palace Penguins United Big Book Study. This week I'm pleased to reintroduce Max D, who's kindly coming along to continue with the Big Book Study. Over to you, Max.
Thank you, Laws. Good morning, everybody. My name is Max. I'm an alcoholic. Hope you're well. Before the meeting, I like to do a little bit of reflection from before the meeting. There's a lot of energy in the room, which is so amazing. I love it on a Saturday morning. But this week in particular, oh my goodness, yes, people, do not give up your day jobs. We have had I don't even know what you would call it, but some pretty lame jokes. And then something happened where everybody started to make up their own jokes. And I'm meanwhile in the background sending a message to somebody else, and it's like, am I in the right room? What is actually going on here? But of course, I've had to start participating, and I have sent a link to Julian for two very, very, very funny ladies who make up their own jokes all the time. So Julian, you may send it out so that everybody can participate, because I think that you'll learn a great deal from these two beautiful women. And we know our lives are about progress, not perfection. Who knows, we might see some of you on one of those many talent shows where you end up in front of the royal family telling jokes. The chances are slim, but hey, there's always hope, Anyway, that has just lightened my heart a little bit this morning with all of this energy. It's fabulous. So thank you for that. And now down to the more serious matters of our discussion to wives. I know you are all thrilled and excited to be hearing about this. I can't believe we only covered husband number one last week. I didn't have bang on last week, didn't I, about husband number one? God bless him. And thank you to my dear friend who sent me a photograph of a beautiful little crate of logs that they had sitting by the fire. Yeah, do you remember we talked about that? Throw another log on the fire, darling. Well, they showed me their logs by their little stove. That made me giggle. And for anybody that's listening to this and hasn't heard last week's, it'll all make sense if you listen to the previous one or read the previous pages in the book about making everything sweet in those romantic evenings by just throwing another log on the fire. There's another couple of lines in the next few pages that make me giggle every time I read them. I don't know whether we'll get to them this time around. It depends on how long we talk about husband number two, which we're going into now. So like Law says, we're on page 112. The paragraph beginnings, suppose, however, that your husband fits the description of number two. So we obviously have 4 descriptions to go through. And I'm just kind of going to go with the flow with all of this. Every time I've come off the meeting with the chapter to the wives, I've always been so reflective as to, where the message might have hit, because I'm never quite sure with this chapter for myself as well as to how much I go into too much detail about, my experience in my life as to how I read this chapter. So I hope I'm not causing any confusion with anybody by jumping in and out of the alcoholic's experience and the actual message to the wife. I've asked a few people as to whether, it's hitting the mark or whatever. And yeah, the feedback has been yes. So I hope it continues. But if anybody has any queries or questions, you all have my details and my number. Get in touch and we can talk them through. So yeah, let's get into talk about husband number two. And really, the next line, the same principles which apply to husband number one should be practiced. So we've got a little bit of a build up here as to what we should be doing. So don't just draw a line in the sand and say, okay, we've gone through the criteria for number one. It sounds as if your husband isn't that, so we'll just move on to number two and never reflect on the progression of the illness. It's important to understand that the wife might be experiencing all four of these husbands in one person as the illness progresses, or maybe not. But the important thing here is that they're reading all of the chapter. And if you think about even the length of this chapter, there's a significant number of pages. So there's a significant number of detailed, masterly details in here, that one can't skip through. You know, it's important to, like we read the book from cover to cover, it's important for, other individuals to read it, to give them the full context of everything. And certainly that's what would have happened back in the day when the fellowships and the meetings weren't set up. They would have had the book and that would have been it. But that in and of itself is a powerful thing anyway, which we know. You know, you may be one man with your book. You're never by yourself anyway. So anyway, I'm rambling a little bit. So he might be the same. We follow the same principles as husband number one. But after his next binge, ask him if he would really like to get over drinking for good. There's that thing that we learn in chapter 3 more about alcoholism. You know, if we want to stop all together. This is not about asking, you know, maybe we should control this here. Maybe we should just, you know, start to measure the amount you're taking, or maybe you want to move from the vodka to the, you know, low alcohol stuff, whatever. Yeah, this is about asking if they want to get over drinking for good. Do not ask that he do it for you or anyone else. Just would he like to? So there's two important things there. That he's not going to do it for you, and that he's not going to do it for the children. Because when we get into that territory, and an alcoholic is going to do it for the children, or going to do it for the wife, that is not a sustainable long-term solution for that individual. They have to want to do it for themselves. So notice that the word like is in italics. Would he like to? That he's not being coerced, that he's not being put under pressure, that it's not you that's making him do it, that it's him making the decision for himself, that he is ready for immediate use to start the program and start on the journey of the principles that are set out in this book. Because you know what it's like. Certainly, and we talked about this last week, didn't we? When somebody spoke to me about my drinking. And I wasn't ready. They were putting me under pressure. It was none of their business. So what did I do? I repelled, and I was never in that person's company again. I avoided them like the plague. And it gave me more of a reason to go all the harder into doing what I was doing. Like, who do you think you are? Who are you to tell me what to do with my life? You don't know how hard my life is. How dare you tell me what to do with my life? So I'm going to show you. I can manage my life very well. I don't need to see you again. You never need to be part of my life. And therefore the isolation started. You know that line on page 17? And There Is a Solution, the first page of There Is a Solution, it talks about the fellowship, and it talks about the fact we are people that would not mix in relation to the personalities and the types of people within the meetings. You know, there's all sorts of everybody in this meeting. I wouldn't normally be mixing with all of the people on here, you know, but at the same time, I also see that line as we're normally people that would not mix, because in the end, our addiction takes us to the place of isolation through choice, or we don't have anybody around us because they have had to make the decision to leave because of the circumstances we created within the household, within the workplace, with our friends. So there is a onus on here for the alcoholic, 100%. This is something that they have to do for themselves. And this is about them in that first step of recovery. This is the first step of recovery. Like it says on page 30 and more about alcoholism. And it's interesting that they always refer in this chapter to read the chapter on alcoholism. What they're specifically referring to is chapter 3. So on page 30, the first step to recovery is that we had to fully concede to our innermost selves that we were alcoholic. So you're not doing it for the kids. You're not doing it for your wife. I had to fully concede. I had to do that step 1. We admitted. So we let in the idea that I was powerless over alcohol and that my life had become unmanageable. There was a million people telling me that I was powerless in their words. There was a million people telling me that my life was running awry. There was a million people telling me that. But until I admitted it, there was no action from a solution to becoming recovered. Absolutely not. So with husband number 2, because they're a little bit further in the progression, a little further down the line, the chances are he would like to. So in that case, show him your copy of this book and tell him what you've found out about alcoholism. What have you found out about alcoholism? If you've read this book, A Physical Allergy, A Mental Obsession, which will never be overcome until the spiritual malady is overcome. That's, if you're reading the book, what the wife is learning. When anybody is learning if they read this book. And the thing for me that I love about this chapter is the emphasis on the book. The emphasis on the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Okay? Here, they're not talking about go to one meeting one day at a time. They're not saying send your husband to many meetings because that's what will help them make it. No, the instruction is the same. Read this book and direct your husband to this book because that is the place where you're going to find out the truth of what the individual suffers from, the progressive illness. It's so important to understand that even in the other Fellowship of Al-Anon, they use the spiritual principles from the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Yes, they have their other, principles and practices that they use, but essentially they're using this book as well. And the other thing that just came to my mind also last week, sorry for jumping about a little bit, but this is just how my mind is operating today. It was all those hilarious jokes that have sent me off track. Last week in the sharebacks after the meeting, there was so many beautiful things that people brought to mind from their experience. And it's lovely to listen to them back because what I hear in some of them is that little bit of self-pity coming through, that little bit of guilt coming through, that little bit of shame coming through as to what you're experiencing when you're listening to this back. And I always emphasize the importance of your step 10 and your step 11 and you enlarging your spiritual life through work and self-sacrifice with others in step 12 for you to be able to continue to see the things inside you that are rising to the surface. But the thing that came out last week is when a couple of you shared and you were talking about, and this may well be for anybody now in the room or anybody listening to this, that the 100% trust from your partner is still not there. And that, they're checking up on where you're at and you're receiving messages from them and all of that. That's not always going to be the case. Remember from your program when you went into your step 9 amends, it clearly emphasizes that there is a long road of reconstruction ahead. So bear that in mind also if you're at the beginning of your journey or even if you're a few years in and it feels as if you're still being checked on or you feel as if the trust isn't there or whatever random thoughts are coming into your mind, whether they be paranoid or those, fancied or real is what they talk about on page 66. Whether these thoughts in your mind about where you are at in your relationship with your partner, whether they're fancied or real, this is a journey. This is a long road of reconstruction. But the thing that's going to bring you and your relationships to be whole, to be complete, is you following your spiritual principles. End of story. And if your partner is going to choose to become on that same spiritual path as is going to be described in the next couple of pages that we cover, then that's all for the good. It may feel that you're doing parallel programs, but ultimately those roads will join. And that's when you become whole. That's where you can complete. That's when you become one. Because in any given moment of the day, both of you are going to be finding God now. Like it says at the top of page 59, may you find him now in every given moment. So the reason why I'm raising this is because I sense, I hear, I see from all of the people that are on here that are so diligent and showing up every Saturday, that are doing the work. Don't be concerned, because the promises, if you work this program, the promises will, not if, not but, not maybe, they will come alive in your life. It's a cast iron guarantee. And I know that from experience. And I know that even more than my own experience through the experience of working with others and seeing and listening to the transformations in people's lives and the lives of their families. Even if people do decide to separate for the greater good of each other and the family, life will continue to take on new meaning for you and your family. I acknowledge 100 million% things get tough, and it can be emotional, and it can be worrying. But honestly, you continue with these spiritual principles, this fourth dimension of existence, as opposed to the third dimension of existence of this physical world and getting what you want when you want it, all of that. Yeah. Just do what's suggested and everything will work out perfectly well. I say this to sponsees all the time that, everything is well. It always is well. And it will continue to be well. So don't be hard on yourselves either, Give yourselves a break. You've caused confusion for 20, 25 years. Your partner's right to hold you accountable. And that might be the wrong words, but they're the words that are coming to my mind just now. Your partner's well within their rights to ask a couple of questions, given their experience from the past. It might not always be like that, I had a situation recently with my sister where I didn't tell her where I was going. And she called me and she said, "Where are you?" And I told her where I was. She said, "Margaret, you've done that a few times. You haven't told us where you're going to." And you know what my automatic response was? "But I'm not drinking." And her response to me was, "Margaret, it never crossed my mind that you would even be drinking. All I'm saying is, you're not telling us where you're going and we're wondering where you're at." So the drink thing was never the issue. It has never been the issue. But there's something in me that I had to look at that moment about, why haven't I told them? That was an old behaviour from the past coming into this moment that I still believe is okay in my world. But in actual fact, I'm not being mindful of the people around me. So it isn't about the drink, but what are the patterns that are continuing in me? It was just so beautiful to have that interaction and see all the while when I was telling them, hadn't told them where I was, I had it on my mind. Oh, I must tell them, causing my own anxiety where I wasn't able to be at peace. So, those, like it says on page 62, these problems were of our own making. My lack of peace whilst I was doing what I was doing and not sharing where I was my own situation. I had created that problem myself. And all I had to do was to say, "Hey, do you know what? I'm going here. just radio silence. If you don't hear from me, nothing to be concerned about. But I was causing them more concern by not even communicating with them. So there was something there that I had to look at, that I didn't even realize until she pointed it out to me. But that's the beauty of my step 10, the beauty of my 11, and my beauty of step 12. Anyway, I digress a little bit, and I don't wish to make this self-indulgent, but it's just an example of where, you know, I continue to watch my old behaviours come back into the moment, so I don't go down a road of that pattern becoming the norm. Anyway, so all of that came from nowhere. All I was saying was show him a copy of your book, and the importance of the book. Show him that as alcoholics, the writers of the book understand. 1,000,000% the writers of this book understand. They know every trick inside the book and every trick outside of the book. They understand everything. That's why they've taken the opportunity to write it down, so that we can benefit from all of the goodness that they have experienced. Tell him some of the interesting stories you've read. Yeah, tell him about those 4 stories and more about alcoholism. We talked about them last week, didn't we? Fred, Jim, the jaywalker, the carpet slippers guy. And if you think he will be shy of a spiritual remedy, ask him to look at the chapter on alcoholism. Then perhaps he will be interested enough to continue. We're trying to whet their appetite here. If he is enthusiastic, can you imagine? Like a little bunny rabbit. Yes, I'm so enthusiastic. Give me a copy of this book immediately and let me sit down and read this chapter more about alcoholism. That probably won't happen. If any of the wives are listening to this, the enthusiasm may be curbed. It might be somewhat dull, but enthusiastic all the same. Because the reality of it is that when we pick up this book, it's kind of the realization of, I'm letting this idea in. Even to pick up this book and start to read it is a shift in our thinking, a shift in our thought processes, and possibly moving towards that little glimmer of some sort of psychic personality change. Heaven forbid. So if he is enthusiastic, your cooperation will mean a great deal. If he is lukewarm or thinks he is not an alcoholic, we suggest you leave him alone. No point flogging a dead horse. Even though your husband, partner is on the trajectory of a hopeless condition and a malady doomed to an alcoholic death, all of that is the truth. Leave him alone at this stage. Do not force, do not push. Avoid urging him to follow our program. Avoid. Like the pinpoint precision here is so important, like it is for us in our program. Clear cut. So matter of fact in many respects, because the reality of it is the seed has been planted in his mind. And that's all it takes, just the seed. When my aunt called to see me, she just gave me the number of a local office, a local AA office that was here at the time. And she said, you might want to give them a call. Of course, I went mental and didn't thank her for the number. But interestingly enough, I put the number in my purse. The seed was planted. And she skipped and hopped up the cul-de-sac, delighted with herself, I'm sure, that she had done her bit in passing on the message. And I was ready to kill dead things in the house. In the house by myself, like a ranting lunatic. Who does she think she is? Yeah. You know, talking to the birds in the back garden that I could see out the window. Craziness. But she had planted the seed. And that was the first. I know, Shilling, my life This is the type of things that happened with me. So all we're, no matter how small the seed is, it has been planted. No matter, once somebody mentions you're drinking to you, it's there. It's in plain sight. And what we tended to do was to push it down and push it down and push it down. But if we conceded to our innermost self and got honest with ourselves, we knew what those people were saying was true. I was lying to myself about the truth. And what I wanted to see, what I needed to see, was the truth about the lie I was telling myself. Like, think about that. He knows that thousands of men, much like himself, have recovered. Past tense. They've overcome the drink thing. It has been solved. The continued use of the word recovered goes all the way through the thread of the book. Okay, it's not talking about recovering here. It's talking about full-blown recovered. The drink problem has been solved. But don't remind him of this after he has been drinking, for he may be angry. Sooner or later, you are likely to find him reading the book once more. Wait until repeated stumbling convinces him he must act. For the more you hurry him, the longer his recovery will be delayed. Fact. Couldn't be clearer. That word convinced is so important. Wait until repeated stumbling convinces him. Convinced means to be moved by the evidence. He needs to be moved by the evidence of his own behaviours, his own conduct. Not that is what makes him an alcoholic. Of course it's not. He needs to be moved by the evidence that he can't lift one drink. He needs to be moved by the evidence that once he lifts one drink, he can't put them down. He needs to start to get to understand that he cannot drink like a gentleman, that he can't step over to the nearest bar room and try some controlled drinking, that he hasn't been able to stop altogether. He might have had 4 days, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. He may have even have tried to get to the year, but he hasn't been able to stop altogether by himself. All of these blips along the road are for the good. And that's challenging for your partner and family to watch. It's devastating for the family to watch. But it is all for the good when that seed is planted. And it talks about that in there's a couple of paragraphs down on the forward to the 4th edition. It talks about where the AA seed is planted. I'm just going to read it. And bear with me, please hold. Yeah, in country after country where the AA seed was planted, it has taken root, slowly at first, then growing by leaps and bounds. Now, what they're talking about in that foreword is the fact that when the book was published, when the AA seed, i.e. the big book, was planted, the information grew leaps and bounds. The message grew leaps and bounds. The numbers of recoveries when people focused on the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous was huge in comparison to when somebody didn't use the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. So the thing about it is that the most important thing is to let them know that this big book is available and let them do with it as they wish. Let them falter. Let them fall. Within reason, of course. If they're in danger, you're going to get the emergency services involved. If they're in danger with health, you're going to send them to their doctor. But again, it's telling us not to force this upon them. They need to act upon this for themselves. And see, all the while, you continue with your life, partner, wife. You get on and do what you need to do for your existence and your family's existence. Moves on to number 3. If you have a number 3 husband, you may be in luck. How cool is that? It's progressing, but you may be in luck. It doesn't sound right, does it? It's all very counterintuitive to what you think would normally happen. But happy days. And it's not that you're going to be talking to anybody and saying, oh yes, I'm not talking to somebody, a wife or a partner, and, taking off a list and saying, oh, well, he's not number 1, he's not number 2, but he's number 3. Brilliant. We're off to the races here because you are in luck. I'm not talking to these people like, yes, he's categorized it as number 3. We have the information in our mind and we're working this through, because we can get very academic with all of this thing, can't we? It's not for me to say to this person, yes, I think you've got number 3 and this is what you need to do. So being certain he wants to stop, notice that difference. He wants to stop. You can go to him with this volume, get this, as joyfully as though you had struck oil. My friend is here right in the front and the center of my screen, and I can see him cheerfully laughing, joyfully laughing. And I think what you might be thinking is, yeah, right. Like you did that, did you? You joyfully skipped up, having put another log on the fire, darling, for that romantic evening, and said, here's this beautiful book, and I feel as if I've struck oil now that I'm handing it over to you. We're set to make a fortune. Yay! Yes. Yeah, it's a bit cheesy, isn't it, in the language that they're using here, but I see their enthusiasm, and I do know what they're saying here. We take this in the spirit in which it's meant, as I say to people all the time. And it's not the only time that they talk about striking oil. It is mentioned later on in the book as well. But you get what they're trying to describe here, that thank God, here we're at. He's ready to go here. He's saying that he really wants to stop. There's green shoots on the horizon here. Let's take this opportunity to strike this whilst we can, because, when we dig deep, we're going to find something that's going to transform our lives. If you think of the jubilation when people first struck oil, and one should be, they probably won't be as enthusiastic as my friend and I have been here this morning about this little message. But underneath it all, there is that joy within, and that release of breath, and the shoulders fall when the wife comes and says, you know what, Mags, he's ready. Can you send that number? Can you give me the details of that meeting? Can you come pick him up? They really truly see that they've struck oil, and that the efforts that they have made have been worth it, and that they have played a part in helping this situation come to this beautiful fruition, because they've been steadfast in the approach that they have taken for themselves. And with that breath, with that sense of relief, it then gives them probably even more freedom to go and do what they need to do for themselves. And then the journey together starts and progresses. That's the beauty of all of this. Together, they strike oil. Together. That said, he may not share your enthusiasm, but he is practically sure to read the book, and he may go for the program at once. He may at once. He may not. Either way, it doesn't matter. If he does not, you will probably not have to wait long, because he's already progressing through this illness. It's about you keeping the momentum going of what you need to do as the partner and wife. Again, you should not crowd him. Let him decide for himself. It's his accountability, his responsibility, not yours. You're dealing with an adult here. You've got your children to look after potentially. And although back in the day we would have been behaved like spoiled children, let's not let that cloud the fact that we're adults here and this is an accountability for oneself to do what we need to do. This is funny. Cheerfully see him through more sprees. Can you imagine? Cheerfully see him through more sprees. Oh my God, can you imagine? Like, my partner left. He couldn't cheerfully see me through anything. He was done. He was out of there. Gone. Didn't even tell me he was leaving. Just packed up and went. I had to come home and find the house empty. That's how cheerful he was in the end. But I had forgotten about the number of years prior to that where he had tried and tried and tried again, you know? So no wonder he left. And fair play to him for having the courage and the sensibility to do it, because he was getting nowhere with me. And ultimately, him leaving set me off onto another phase of my development where I went so far down the scale. So as a result of him making the decision for his life and moving on, something happened with me, which inevitably has got me to sit here today. So everything, 100% in my life, happens for a reason. I might not understand it at the time, because it was all about me and the self-pity and how dare he do this, and he's taken all my money and he's done this and he's done that. Oh my goodness me. He gave more time to this relationship than I ever did because I wasn't interested in it, because I was a selfish, self-centered, good for nothing, drunk that wanted my way and got my way no matter what. There you go. And I have great admiration and respect for that guy, that gentle man, and what I put him through. So yeah, cheerfully see them through their next sprees. I wonder what he thought when he was writing that down. Well, obviously that's what Lois did with him. Maybe. Who knows? History would tell you not. Anyway, I'm not a historian. I don't know any of that. And if that wasn't the case and you are a historian, please feel free to give me a call and let me know. I never want to get anything wrong. You know what I'm like. I don't want the AA police coming to find me to say, oh no, that was factually incorrect, Mags. Okay. I'm just here to help the sick and suffering alcoholic, and I hope I'm doing that. So talk about his condition or this book only when he raises the issue. In some cases, it may be better to let someone outside the family present the book. So my auntie was sent into the cul-de-sac. You know, that was missile number 1. Send in the big guns. Mum's oldest sister just lives round the corner. Send her in. She'll listen to auntie. Yeah, she will. And, you know, to be fair, I did, because when I seen her coming down the cul-de-sac, I thought, uh-oh, here comes trouble. Because she wasn't just coming round to have a cup of tea and a biscuit. No, she was not. She was on a mission. She was on an assignment, and she blew that assignment out of the water. She did an exceptional job, which I thought was horrific. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. She planted the seed and just dandered back up the cul-de-sac. I'm sure she was delighted with herself, and then she would have phoned the rest of the family, engaging them with her mission complete. Handing the baton on to the next person. Is this ringing any bells for anybody? What happened, you know? After Auntie Anne, who was going to come? Sister. Yeah. There was nobody else you could have sent after Auntie other than my sister. Yeah, she has even bigger guns. And you know the thing is, they're both redheads. Yeah. I know. Fierce. Now that's a sweeping generalization. But yeah, fiery, you know, fiery. You're really getting all my family secrets here. I shouldn't be disclosing all of this stuff, but this is the type of stuff that the chapter to the wives brings up in me. It's really important, I think, to share all of this little stuff. And if it's boring you, then don't listen to it. But if it's helpful, good. I'm having a lovely time, so I don't really care. So in some cases, it may be better to let somebody outside the family. Yep. They can urge action without arousing hostility. And if your husband is otherwise a normal individual, your chances are good at this stage. Yeah, if he's normal. You know, everybody's looking at me going, she's totally and utterly insane. She is totally and utterly abnormal. But the reality of it is I was so far gone, I wasn't even husband number 3 category. I was straight to 4. I didn't go through the methodology of 1, 2, and 3. I was straight in at the top, level 4. That's how far down the scale I had gone. Completely and utterly hopeless, oblivious to the fact that I was going to die. Totally thinking that alcohol, drugs, everything was my solution to life. So here's the 4th classification. You would suppose that men in the 4th classification would be quite hopeless beyond medical aid. That's the word meaning in this book. Completely and utterly hopeless. But that is not so. This little bit is so phenomenal when we get to this last line. You know, we learn ourselves as alcoholics in the chapter Working with Others that our mission in the first instance is not to give people hope. We have to talk about the deadly illness. We have to talk about the fact that we're hopeless, that we're beyond medical aid, that we're doomed to an alcoholic death, that this is a progressive illness, that this gets worse, never better. That's what we're instructed to do in Working with Others, to tell the alcoholic the truth about what they suffer from. The more hopeless, the better, in fact. Everybody had given up on them. That's exactly what had happened in my family. Totally and utterly given up on me. They had to let me go. You've heard me say that time and time again. They had no other option than to let me go. And as a result of them doing that, that's why I'm sitting here today. Defeat seemed certain. Defeated by alcohol, 100%. Beat. Down for the count. I was no longer able to be on guard, and they were watching that all before their very eyes until they couldn't, because they had to let me go. And then they didn't know where I was. They didn't know where I was living. They didn't even know probably where I was working at the time, because I was in and out of jobs like a yo-yo. But here's the thing, and this is the promise for all of the wives and all of the partners, even if you've given up on them and that your whole family seems to be defeated by this alcohol thing, and that your partner ultimately seems to be defeated by this alcohol thing. Here's the deal, and this is the real deal. Yet often such men had spectacular and powerful recoveries. Full stop, period, highlight, underline, asterisk, put in lights, whatever you need to do when you are talking to the partner, you're talking to the wife, or be you a partner or wife that's here and listening to this or whatever. Spectacular. What a beautiful, amazing word. Spectacular. You don't often use that in language and in conversation, do you? And powerful recoveries. Like, what a fabulous line to bring to life what happens. And when I look on this screen, I can see the demonstrations in this physical world of the spectacular and powerful recoveries. Not just for the people in our fellowship, but for the wonderful, amazing people from Al-Anon that are listening to this too. Spectacular and powerful recoveries. And if you're here, in this meeting today or listening to this and you're in the doldrums and you're still stuck in that in-between situation where you know you have a problem, you don't think you have a problem, you're going to meetings, you're not going to meetings, you haven't got a big book, you haven't got a sponsor. Do you know what? Listen to that line, because what's ready and waiting for you is a spectacular and powerful recovery if you do the work. Action is required. You will not receive, because this is what is going to be given to you. It's given to you by taking the action. You've got to take the action. The partner, the wife has to take the action. This is what this is all about. And following these spiritual principles. It is so simple. You can miss it. There is no working out to do. Everything that you need to do is set out, and you need go no further for any authentication. That first paragraph in the forward to the first edition, you need go no further for any authentication about what you need to do. It's all here in the 164 pages. That's why nearly 75%, like it says in the forward to the second edition, 75% of recoveries happened when you used this book. And for anybody that doesn't think that that's the case, I'm going to read it to you because it's so important. Of alcoholics who came to AA, used AA, the big book, and took the action and really tried, 50% got sober at once. Partner, wife, that's what's going to happen when you continue to place the book in front of them and urge them to get a sponsor and go to the fellowship. And not only did they get sober at once, they remained that way. They stayed sober. The last paragraph in the forward to the fourth edition talks about that. People came to AA and stayed sober. It also talks about that 25% that sobered up after some relapses. After some relapses. Relapse might be part of your journey. It doesn't have to be part of your journey, you know. But if you do AA in the way that is set out, relapse doesn't have to be part of it. It might be, because if you're not doing the work, it will be. You know, 75% recoveries back in the day. Wow. That is spectacular. That is powerful. And that is what is on the plate for you. If you choose to, not because your wife and partner tells you to. Remember, we talked about it last week. Frothy, emotional appeal seldom, if ever, suffices with us alcoholics. So be your partner or a wife. That ain't going to work, people. It ain't going to work. So yeah, I love it. I just love that line. And then we turn to page 114 and it gives us the little caveat. Of course they do. They're going to tell us everything here. There are exceptions. Yeah, there are exceptions. There's always going to be exceptions to any rule, isn't there? But they're emphasizing the truth, the promise that is available. Then they hit us with this. Some men have been so impaired by alcohol that they cannot stop. Sometimes there are cases where alcoholism is complicated by other disorders. Yeah, outright mental defectives is what Bill talks about in those words between the two letters in the doctor's opinion. Outright mental defectives, yes. You might be a manic depressive as described within the doctor's opinion. There's new medical definitions for that now. You may have other mind-altering situations going on in your life. But the reality of it is, more often than not, when you deal with the alcohol and deal with the drugs, many of those things can be taken, no longer exist. Because when you go on the path of recovery, all of those things can be dealt with as well. They are emphasizing here, like they do in working with others, for us when we're working with newcomers into the fellowship, a good doctor or psychiatrist can tell you whether these complications are serious. Seek the medical advice. No one from AA, even if they're a doctor, shouldn't be offering the medical advice. You should be sending to your own GP. You should be sending to your own accident and emergency. no matter what my qualifications are and what I do as a job, I'm not giving anybody advice outside what it says in these clear-cut directions. Go to the doctor, see the medical professionals. In any event, try to have your husband read this book. Read this book. Top of page 112, there's an amazing group in America, and their group is called Page 112 because the first 3 words on the top of the page are read this book. If there's a clear-cut direction, isn't that it? What have you got to do? Yeah, read this book. That simple? Yeah. We're just complicating the back end out of it, trying to do everything else. Highlight that, asterisk, underline it, do whatever you want to do. Read this book. His reaction may be one of enthusiasm. If he is already committed to an institution, he may well be, but can convince you and your doctor that he means business. That's important, that he means business. Actually, what he's saying is he's going to do the work. He's ready, meaning for immediate use, that his circumstances have convinced him. He's been moved by the evidence. Now, he means business. Give him a chance to try our method. The Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, having a spiritual awakening as the result of the steps, unless the doctor thinks his mental condition is too abnormal or dangerous. Take the medical information. But the reality of it is, when we, in my life, took the medical information, I had to go to a rehab for 3.5 months. The solution when I come out was no different. Read this book. The medical situation was dealt with. I was taken away from the world for 3.5 months, came out a few days later, contacted my sponsor, worked the steps like the desperation of a drowning man, because it goes on to say, we make this recommendation with confidence. They're making every single recommendation in this book with absolute confidence. They're sharing their bitter experience. It works. And because they were so convinced of the solution that they had, they've taken the time, the effort and energy to put it into this book so that we can be sitting here nearly 90 years later, availing of this opportunity. Like, the reality of it is, I and many others take our responsibility very, very seriously. You know, we're carrying this message now to keep this fellowship alive for the people that don't even know they need it yet. Because if I don't do that, I can't depend on somebody else in the room doing it. I have one book, one man with his book. It's my responsibility to keep on carrying this message for the people that don't even know they need it yet. That's how serious this is. How could we sit about in meetings and be lazy and lay about and not take our step 12 so seriously? For years, we've been working with alcoholics committed to institutions. Since this book was first published, AA has released thousands of alcoholics from asylums and hospitals of every kind. Like, it's millions now. Millions in this day and age. Listen to this line. This is another powerful, and this is why reading the book from cover to cover, you would miss these gems. The majority have never returned to the asylums. The majority have never returned to those hospitals. The majority have never returned to those treatment facilities. Why? Because the power of God goes deep. Like, isn't that miraculous? Like it says in the last page of We Agnostics, you know, a miracle of healing. This is what this program is about. The power of God runs deep. Full-blown recovery, not only for us as individuals, but for our partners, the wives, and the entire family. And I'm just going to finish on this. Back to page 15, end of Bill's story, bottom paragraph. This is what will happen. this is what will happen. The joy of living we really have, even under pressure and difficulty. We have seen hundreds of families set their feet in the path that really goes somewhere, have seen the most impossible domestic situations righted. My God, the most impossible domestic situations righted. Feuds and bitterness of all sorts have been wiped out. We've seen men come out of asylums and resume a vital place in the lives of their families and communities. Vital meaning life-giving place in their families and communities. Business and professional men have regained their standing. There is scarcely, listen to that word, there is scarcely any form of trouble and misery which has not been overcome among us. Like, that's the promise. That's what's available. When we all pull together, the family, whoever it is that's affected by the addiction, there is a program to give everybody full-blown recovery. The alcoholic, the addict does theirs, the family does theirs, and as they work through these spiritual principles, they come together as one. They become complete. And you know what? See, us lot, us down and outs, who people feared for our lives, and our families were in absolute despair and just cut off from normal life. We're changing the world. We're changing the world. We're changing how children experience family life. You know, that's our mission. That's my assignment. And it's the most powerful, spectacular thing to have the opportunity and the honor and the privilege to be involved in all of this stuff. You know, we're never doing this by ourselves, ever. And there's no wife and there's no partner that is ever by themselves. You know, this is where we join together in brotherly and harmonious action. That's the great news that this book carries. It tells us that on page 17. So I think this morning this is all a call to action. You know, let's not rest in our laurels. A call to action to pull together, to keep on doing what we're doing, because we're changing the world, people. It's a horrible world out there in many respects, but I don't even live in that existence. No, I've got a mission. You've got a mission. What are we doing about it today? So I'll leave it at that.
Thanks. Greg? You want to do turn the recording off?